Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I've got a very exciting video for you today. We are going to be playing with the brand new SONIA G Pro Eye Set. I've got all 5 right here. If we can just take a moment and appreciate their beauty. So I'm going to be applying eyeshadow with these 5 brushes, and then I'm going to do some comparisons with some existing eye brushes that I have that I think are kind of similar. So if you're interested in hearing more about these 5 very beautiful brushes, then just keep on watching. So first I want to mention that these brushes were sent to me courtesy of Beautylish and SONIA G. Thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart for sending me these brushes. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I've been so looking forward to this release. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So this set consists of 5 brushes. They are all made out of natural goat hair, specifically Psychoho goat hair, which is the softest, smoothest kind of goat hair that you can get. And all the handles have that beautiful red ombre lacquer finish that we've all come to know and love from SONIA G. So the shape of the handles are that they come to a point, which is different from her original set. So this is her original set. It has a much fatter handle, if you will. These have a much thinner handle. I think when it comes to pros and makeup artists, they prefer a thinner handle. That way they can fit more brushes into their case. But you can see that it comes out to something close to as thick as the original handle for those that like that kind of ease of grip. I happen to like the thicker handles. I've heard some people find it more difficult to hold, but I happen to like these handles that are shaped like this. They just remind me of paintbrushes. I find them very comfortable in the hand. And what I also like about these brushes is that they're like they're not heavy, but they are like weighted properly, so they don't feel too thin. They don't feel too light in the hand. I personally just don't like brushes that feel too light. For me, that just feels a little bit chintzy. I feel like I don't have as much control over them. So I think these have a really nice feel to them. So let's talk about each brush a little bit, and then we'll get into a demo of me using them, and then I will go and kind of compare brushes that I have in my existing collection to these. So let's talk about the 2 dyed goat hair brushes first. Here I have the Blender Pro, and this is the one that probably looks most like a typical blending brush. It has a round ferrule and it comes to a soft point at the top. And then next we have the Builder Pro, which is another dyed goat hair brush. This one has a pinched ferrule and it has a nice paddle shape, almost like a small fingertip. And then the remaining 3 brushes all have undyed goat hair. So let's start with the Worker Pro, and this one has a pinched ferrule, so it's a flat shader brush, and let's just hold it up next to the Builder Pro. So the Worker Pro has longer bristles, and because it has undyed goat hair, you can use this with cream products, cream and liquid products. Next we have the Crease Pro, again undyed goat hair, and this comes to a much more severe point than the Blender Pro. Let me just hold those 2 up next to one another, and you can see that these bristles are shorter in length. And then last but not least, we have the Pencil Pro, and this comes to a very nice point. It has shorter bristles, so there's a nice density to these bristles, giving you a lot of control. All right, so I'm just dying to play around with these brushes. Enough talking. I've whipped out a bunch of eyeshadows, or I should say a couple of eyeshadows that I really wanted to try with these brushes. The first is this Viseart Theory palette in Cashmere. I also took out the Natasha Denona Camel palette. I think these formulas are very different. I find the Natasha Denona to be very creamy, and I find the Viseart to be a little bit drier. So I think they behave very differently, and I think it'll be interesting to see how these brushes kind of behave with these 2 different formulas. So first I'm going to use the Blender Pro. I'm going to go into the Viseart Theory palette in Cashmere. I'm just sort of feeling up these brushes a little bit more. These bristles are a lot stiffer and more densely packed than a lot of other brushes that I have. So because of that, I'm going to try and be very careful with the amount of pigment that I pick up. The denser the brush, the more pigment it's going to pick up. So I'm going to be very careful. I'm just going to dip in ever so gently. Viseart shadows are incredibly pigmented. I'm going to take some on my outer corner and blend that in. Oh my. Look at how much pigment that picked up. And I just tapped it into the pan. So these pick up quite a bit of product. Definitely be careful. And blends it out like a dream. I was really worried. I had a big like dollop of shadow right there, and I was really afraid it wasn't going to blend out, but it blends out perfectly. Lovely. I'm just carrying it through my socket area. That is blending out very nicely. I'm just going to take a microfiber towel. I'm going to just swipe off any extra shadow I may have on there because I want to go into the Natasha Denona next. So with the Natasha Denona, I think this one is probably the closest. I think it's a little bit warmer, but that's okay. I'm going to go into this shade over here, and I'm just going to dip in just once because I think that's enough. And I'm going to place that down. I mean, look at how much pigment it picked up. And you saw I just tapped it in there. And now I'm going to blend it out. I mean, one thing I really love about SONIA G brushes is that they really kind of take a lot of the work away from you. I don't feel like I have to blend quite as hard. I don't feel like I have to go back and forth quite as long. It really, really does a lot of the work for you. I am going to use the Worker Pro, which is the undyed goat hair, and it has longer bristles than the Builder Pro. So I'm going to use this brush and go into the deepest shade in these palettes and deepen out my outer corner a bit. And I chose this Worker Pro with the longer bristles versus the Builder because I definitely want a lighter application of this very dark color. I'm always kind of terrified of going in way too dark with a dark color. It can really kind of ruin a look. So I'm going to go into the pan, pick up enough, tap off the excess there, and I'm going to pat this onto my outer corner. And blend it out. Very pretty. I just picked up a little bit more there, and I'm gonna keep blending that in. I like how stiff these bristles are. Really, again, it does so much of the work for you. Because they're stiffer than a lot of the flat shader brushes that I have, I feel like it does the blending really, really quickly, which is great for a dark shadow. Okay, I'm going to again kind of wipe off any excess shadow I have onto my microfiber towel here. And then I'm going to dip into the dark brown shade in the Camel palette. I'm just going to use the other side of the shader too. Really don't want to mix up the two. I patted it a couple times in the pan on my outer corner, and I'm just patting to get the pigment down. And now I'm going to kind of swipe back and forth to blend it out. And I'm keeping the shader, you know, flat. I'm not doing this to blend it out. I'm leaving it pretty flat against my lid here. This shade is just not as dark as the Viseart, so that's going to have a little bit less impact just because of the shade. It looks like airbrushed. Wow. Okay. Not surprised. Loving these brushes so far. Let's see, what can I use next? Let me use the Builder Pro. So this is the one that has the dyed goat hair, it has the pinched ferrule, but it has the shorter bristles. So I think this will be great for like shimmery shades. So I'm gonna go into this lightest shimmer shade here in the Viseart. Just gonna pat the brush in there, knock off any excess, and I'm gonna place this on the inside inner portion of my lid towards the center. Pick up a little bit more. Wow. Wow. That is a nice application. I'm going to try and blend these two together a little bit more. Well, that laid the product down very nicely. So far I haven't talked about how soft these bristles feel on my skin because I feel like you should already know that, but let me just say, in case you didn't, that these bristles are so soft. They're like minky soft on the skin. So if you have any kind of sensitivities to anything that's rough in the slightest, these are going to be your best friend. So smooth, just beautiful. So for the Natasha Denona side, I'm going to go in with this shade here, and I'm just going to flip this brush around, wipe off the excess on my towel, and go into this color. Now this shade is definitely deeper than the Viseart shade. So this one just kind of stands out because it's a cooler tone. But they both went on very nicely. I really like this one, Builder Pro. So we have a crease brush here, and I never really use crease brushes because I don't have a typical crease. I don't have that like deep set socket line area. So let me just see if I can fudge something with this just so we can play around with this brush. Again, this one has fairly long hairs, probably not quite as long as the Blender Pro. Yeah, a little bit shorter, probably a couple millimeters there. And it comes to a much more severe point than the Blender Pro. But let's see what I can do here. Maybe I'll just take the deepest shade in each palette and just kind of go into my socket area and see how it performs. And just bring that in. That's nice. I feel like I just gave myself like a very soft cut crease there. And I can definitely keep blending it to soften it up a bit. It just sort of deepens up that whole area. Let's try it on the other side. Let me go into the Natasha Denona. Again, I'm going to go into this darker shade, but it is not quite as dark as the Viseart. So we'll see if I can get the same kind of effect. So I'm going to tap off the excess here. Well, I ended up bringing that much higher than on this side. Let me see if I can blend that out. It does a really nice job blending though, I have to say. Like this all looks very, very soft. It's not exactly placed where I want it. I went a little bit too high up there, but the blend is very nice. Very, very soft. Anyway, that's the Crease Pro brush. And then finally we have the Pencil Pro brush. So I'm just gonna take it and go into the deepest color again and line my eyes. I love how stiff and dense these bristles are. You can really, really work it into the lash line. And then the Natasha Denona dark shadow here. All right, so let's talk about first impressions of these brushes. I think they're incredibly soft. I think that they feel really luxurious. I think they're really easy to handle. I do actually like the handles. I think they are really, really nice in the hand. Very comfortable to hold down here at the thinner part, very comfortable to hold at the thicker part here. The bristles, like I mentioned, are very, very soft, and I love the density for each job that these brushes are meant to do. So the pencil brush, incredibly, incredibly dense. This blender brush, I think, is a little bit denser and a little bit stiffer than most blender brushes I have, and I feel like that really helped with the blending a lot. These paddle brushes have a little bit more give, which I think is really nice for what I use them for that darker shadow on the outer corner. The softness really lends themselves to putting down like a nice soft application of the pigment and allows you to kind of blend them out really nicely. This crease brush, like I mentioned, I don't use brushes like this very often, but that was kind of neat how I could kind of do this definition right here really quickly. And if I wanted to do a more kind of theatrical, dramatic, kind of soft reverse cut crease, I don't even know what I just said. This actually did a really great job for that. Or even if I just want to blend out that line, I usually have like a transition shadow there in the socket line, and then I'll put a lighter shade there. And sometimes there's just too much of like an obvious line between the two. This will come in really handy to just blend out that little area. This will be really great. So upon first use, I really love these. I know I'm going to be grabbing for most of these a lot. Definitely these four. Like I said, I just don't use brushes shaped like this often. I know I'm going to be reaching for these a lot. I just feel like when you have brushes that are like this shape, you have one nice blender and you have one nice flat shader, you almost don't need any other eyeshadow brush. These are awesome. So I do want to talk a little bit more about this Blender Pro brush. I know you guys are going to be asking me, and I'll do this with the other brushes, but I think it's the most important with this one. So as you guys know, I'm constantly on the hunt for like the perfect blender brush because I love the original Tom Ford number 13, which is out of production now. They've switched over to synthetics, and I just haven't been able to find one that I really like. So here is a close-up of the two brushes. So here's the Tom Ford 13, here's the SONIA G blender brush. Now, I don't think my search is over. I don't think the shape of the SONIA G is similar enough for me to say, okay, I feel like my search is over. It's definitely pointier, which is not my favorite. I really like a domed shape like you see here with the Tom Ford. Now, this shape is not going to stop me from using it because the other Tom Ford 13 brushes that I have are this shape, and let me show you. So here is another Tom Ford 13 brush that I have, and you can see it's much more similar. So next, let's lay out the Blender Pro next to two Hakuhodo brushes. The one with the gold ferrule is the S142, and the one with the chrome ferrule is B142. So they're the same model, but they have two different brush types. One is Squirrel, the S142, and the B142 is undyed goat hair. So the Blender Pro, I believe the diameter of the ferrule is wider, is longer. Bristle length seems to be about the same. And the two Hakuhodo brushes I have are a bit pointier than the SONIA G. Next up, I have it next to another Hakuhodo brush. This is the J5533. And you can see that this kind of has like a flat top to it. I thought it was going to be more rounded, but it ended up being very, very flat across the top, which is great when you need to kind of buff out shadows. But you can see that they are very different in style there. And next I have it laid next to two Wang brushes. One is the 03 and one is the 16. But these two brushes, I think, are the same brush from Wang basically. But you can see that the ferrule diameter is just a little bit wider, I want to say. And these brushes are much fluffier. The SONIA G brush is feels much more densely packed than the Wang. The Wang brushes feel a little bit looser. And now I have it next to the Wang number 4 brush. And these brushes look very, very similar to me. Again, I find the SONIA G bristles to be a little bit denser, the Wang to have a lot more give to them. The width of the Wang ferrule seems to be just ever so slightly shorter, but the bristle length seems to be the same. And then last but not least, we have it next to the Wang number 17 brush. And you can see here that the bristles are a bit longer with the SONIA G, and they're a bit pointier than the Wang. Again, I find the Wang brushes to be much more fluffy and more loosely packed than the SONIA G. The SONIA G Blender Pro is much denser and firmer. All right, let's move on to the Worker Pro. I'm going to go ahead and compare these to some of the original workers from the SONIA G line and also some other Hakuhodo and Wang brushes. So here you see it next to Worker 1 and Worker 2. You can see immediately that the bristles are not quite as dense. They come to a little bit more of a rounder point where I feel like the Worker 1 and Worker 2 have more of a squarish top. And you can also see that the Worker 1 and Worker 2 brushes have a much thicker ferrule. Even though they're both pinched, they're much thicker. So you can say that the Worker Pro is definitely much more of a typical flat shader brush shape. Next, we have it sitting next to the Hakuhodo J5523, which currently is my favorite flat shader brush. The Hakuhodo seems to be the same ferrule width. They're both pinched, and the Hakuhodo seems to be just a little bit thicker than the Worker Pro. The brush shape seems to be fairly similar. I can't tell for sure because my Hakuhodo is so dirty and needs a good bath, but the bristles you can tell have splayed out quite a bit. And I don't think that's going to be happening with the Worker Pro. I can see that the bristles along the side are a bit longer, so even if it splays out a bit, it's not going to look quite as fluffy as the J5523. And next we have the Wang number 18. This brush seems to have more of that square shape along the top. It's less rounded. The bristles are just maybe a millimeter longer than the SONIA G, but the ferrule width and the thickness of the pinch seems to be very, very similar. And then last but not least, I have it next to the Chikuhodo GSN 9. And the ferrule width of the GSN 9 actually seems a little bit wider, and it does seem a teensy bit thicker, but the bristles are shorter. So the GSN9 is going to give you a bit of a more precise application, but I find the bristles to have a bit more give. These GSN bristles are squirrel hair, so they're going to be softer than the goat hair. So I feel like even with the shorter bristles, it's not going to pick up quite as much pigment as the Worker Pro. And here's the Worker Pro next to the Wang number 6 brush. You can see that the Wang is a bit bigger all around. It's a little bit fluffier and the bristles are a little bit longer. Now let's do some comparisons for the Builder Pro. So here I have it next to the original builders, the Builder 1 and the Builder 2. The Builder 1 you can see is much shorter bristles. You can see that Builder 2 has a much more densely, firmly, thickly packed bristle bunch there. And the Builder Pro is definitely much more of a traditional flat shader again. It's just a little bit shorter than the Worker Pro. Next we have the Wang number 7 brush, and this is a much thinner, flatter brush than the Builder Pro. It also doesn't have quite as domed of a shape at the top. It's a little bit more squared off, but both brushes seem to have the same density and resilience to the fibers. And then last but not least, I have it next to the Esom W21 brush. This is a sable hair brush, so it is going to be quite different, where the bristles are going to be much stiffer with the sable than they are with the Builder Pro. But the shapes were kind of close enough that I wanted to compare the two. The Esom bristles are a little bit shorter, and the Builder Pro seems to be a little bit thicker. So next let's talk about the Crease Pro brush and do some comparisons with brushes I have in my collection. So first let's compare it to the Crease 1. The Crease 1 has a much shorter bristle length and the ferrule is wider. So it's going to have a denser application than the Crease Pro. Next we have the Wang number 19 brush. This one has a much flatter dome top compared to the Crease Pro. It also has a smaller ferrule, and the bristles seem to be about the same length. Again, this Wang brush is not quite as densely packed as the SONIA G, so there's a lot more give with the bristles. And then next we have the Wang number 20, and this is similar to the 19, but the bristle length is much shorter, and the top is a little bit flatter, and obviously much less pointy than the Crease Pro. So next let's move on to the Pencil Pro brush and compare some pencil brushes I have in my collection to this one. So here is Pencil Pro next to Pencil 1. It is much bigger, it is wider, and the bristles are just a little bit taller. And then there's the obvious difference of the Pencil Pro being undyed goat hair and Pencil 1 being dyed goat hair. And then next we have Pencil 2. Pencil 2 is much larger all around. It's a little bit longer in bristle length. The ferrule is a little bit wider, and it is a much less pointy top. And the bristles are much more domed than the Pencil Pro. And then here is the Wang number 5 brush. This is obviously much smaller all around. A narrower ferrule, shorter bristle length, and not quite as pointy at the top as the Pencil Pro. Here is the Tom Ford number 14 pencil brush. This one seems to be the most similar. They come to a similar point. They have a similar ferrule width. Both are round. Both have undyed goat hair. And the SONIA G seems to be packed more with more bristles. And then last but not least, here it is next to the Esom S31 brush. This brush is smaller all around, not as wide of a ferrule, and shorter bristles. All right, wow, that was a lot of comparisons. I have so many brushes sitting in front of me right now. Anyway, back to this Pro Eye set from SONIA G. I really love the quality of these brushes. I really like how they performed. I was really hoping that this Blender Pro was going to replace my Tom Ford 13, but it is still just a little bit too pointy for my taste. I do wish it was just a little bit more domed out, but if this shape suits you, I think that you are going to love this brush. And I think for those of you who were either interested in her first go at eye brushes, or if you did get them and you thought, you know, I'm not really comfortable with these, definitely give these a shot. These brushes, I want to say, all have a much more traditional shape to them. Like this brush, the crease brush, these kinds of shapes are sort of like easy to understand. You know exactly what to do with these brushes. Same with the two flat shader brushes, the Worker Pro and the Builder Pro. Again, these are shapes that make sense. I think that they are very clear what their use is. If you have any experience with eye brushes, you're going to understand exactly what to do with these. So I think these are more accessible. I think that's the word I'm looking for. These brushes are more accessible to a wider audience, and I think pros are really going to like this thinner handle. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did. Let me know if you have any questions down below in the comment section. I will definitely try and answer them to the best of my knowledge. I have a lot of brushes, but I tend to use them however I want. A lot of people always ask me like, oh, well, didn't you watch this video or didn't you watch that video? Like Wang did a whole video on his brushes and like how to use them. And I just, not that I don't bother, but a lot of times I don't want to be swayed with how someone is going to tell me how to use a brush. I just like to go in and figure out like how the brush best works for me. And I really encourage you all to do the same, to just kind of, play around with your brushes and see how they work best for you. So subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I would love that. And I will see you in my next video.